Higuruma Hiromi cannot look away. Ever since Higuruma could remember, everyone called him a genius. He was blessed with incredible talent, always excelling in academics. But to Higuruma, it was always just about allocating the sufficient effort. But that is simply not the case. Once he awakened as a sorcerer within the Culling Games, we find that his aptitude also extended to practicing jujutsu. In fact, his talent in sorcery went far beyond his talent for practicing law. In just 12 days after awakening as a sorcerer, Higuruma was able to master domain expansion, the pinnacle of sorcery. While his curse technique does rely on his domain, functioning like domains used by ancient sorcerers in the Heian era, where having a one-hit KO domain was on the rarer side, Higuruma, without any guidance, used domain expansion and barrier techniques as his foundation and reverse engineered those barrier techniques to discover the fundamentals of sorcery. Those fundamentals being curse energy manipulation and curse energy reinforcement. In every sense of the word, Higuruma Hiromi is a prodigy, one far more suited to sorcery than law. But more than innate ability, Higuruma possessed something far more profound. What made me and many other fans of the manga gravitate towards his character was his deeply seated devotion to justice. Higuruma was always someone who helped those less fortunate, those who were crying out for help, but it wasn't because he wanted to protect the weak. Higuruma simply couldn't ignore when something wrong was happening right before his eyes. He had an innate duty to right the wrongs he sees within the world at large. That's why, despite his intelligence and proficiency, which would have allowed him to advance in a more lucrative career path, he gravitated towards becoming a lawyer, specifically a defense attorney. Higuruma's name stems from sunflower, which are typically utilized in Japanese law iconography and stylized into lawyer badges. Sunflower symbolize truth, goodness, loyalty, the idea that I'm only looking at you. All traits that perfectly characterize Higuruma's values and his conviction to always keep his eyes open. Many of the individuals we meet in Jujutsu Kaisen have a name befitting their character. Itadori stems from a medicinal herb to represent his desire to help others. Nanami stems from the number 7 to represent his curse technique. Higuruma's profession as a lawyer is intrinsically connected to his identity. And like many characters who become jujutsu sorcerers, Higuruma forces himself onto a path that seems almost fruitless. Japan has a 99.9% conviction rate, and that's a rating the system has a profound pride in. But with such an absurdly high conviction rate, it would make sense that there's those who would fall through the cracks. Japanese judges are incentivized to ensure conviction in their cases due to bias. If a judge rules a case in a way a personal office doesn't like, it likely ends with those judges becoming penalized, with judges who acquit their trials having a less successful career than those who convict. Although, to be fair, what also contributes to that high percentage of conviction rate is that Japanese prosecutors typically take cases where the defendant is obviously guilty, leaving no room for doubt. Someone as intelligent as Higuruma already knows this, but he refuses to take the easier path. A man driven by his convictions, he becomes a defense attorney. Not only that, but he's always taking the most difficult cases he can find, cases where the odds of success are stacked against him. But Higuruma has to. When something is wrong, he cannot look away. The goddess of justice wears a blindfold and bears a scale to symbolize that all those under the law are equals, that the only thing that will decide the fate of the defendant is objective fact, the truth. But humans aren't upholden to that same standard. The ugliness of humanity always allows them to turn a blind eye to those in need. It allows them to turn a blind eye to the truth. Higuruma rejects this, unable to ignore the clinging hands grabbing onto him, begging for help. Turning away from those in need wasn't right to Higuruma. He can't turn his eyes away, so he resolves to keep his eyes open, because he knows no one else will. He will empathize with the victims. He won't stop looking at them. However, that conviction to keep his eyes open, to not look away, becomes a self-inflicted curse. Defense attorneys don't have access to the taxpayer dollars and resources that allow prosecutors to dig up their evidence. These defense attorneys have to use their own fundings for investigation, also having to rely on cases that won't pay them a sustainable amount for future trials. The scales of justice are heavily weighed against the defendant, but Higuruma pushes himself because it's simply the right thing to do. Many of the clients that take Higuruma as their attorney are simply grateful to have someone to stand by their side, to hear them out and believe them regardless of how stacked against them the odds are. But eventually, the state wins. The court rules in favor of guilty, and Higuruma is left with the fallout of the trial. The eyes that once looked at him with hope and gratitude, the eyes that Higuruma resolved himself to never look away from, turn to him with disgust, betrayal, vitriol, hatred, a curse. Higuruma tells himself that they're lashing out from the circumstance they're in, that these victims allowed themselves to hope, only for it to crumble away. But still, the ugliness of humanity is not found solely on those who turn a blind eye, but to those Higuruma swore to defend. After being shown that ugliness time and time again, he starts to wonder, why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for? Why defend the weak when the weak are just as ugly as those who turn away from the truth? With eyes filled with darkness. Higuruma and Geto share some parallels in this regard, both having disillusionment about the ones they swore to protect. What ultimately separates the two, however, is that Higuruma views all humans, sorcerers, non-sorcerers, himself included. They are all hideous creatures in his eyes. He doesn't view himself as above anyone else, and doesn't go on a bender murdering others for the sake of some malformed justice. Besides the two civilians from Oe's trial, Higuruma only killed sorcerers when in the culling games who attacked him first. He even let Propellerhead. He let Propellerhead go when he ran away. Whether he would have gone down the path Geto had taken is debatable, but what stopped Higuruma from sinking deeper into darkness was meeting the right person at the right time. When Yuji first meets Higuruma in Ikebukuro, we see him in a theater, lying within a bathtub, bathing in his attorney suit. He then goes on to play the role of a nasty lawyer by asking Yuji for a consultation fee if he wants to keep talking. These are all attempts by Higuruma to indulge himself in what he sees as wrong now. A rebellion against the conviction of keeping his eyes open that caused him so much anguish, but also a way for him to turn away from the truth, to turn a blind eye to the ugliness he felt in himself when he murdered the prosecutor and judge. A theater is the perfect setting for his introduction, as it symbolizes how the justice system is all just theatrics, each case following a predetermined script where the guilty party is decided from the start. Higuruma comes to that realization during the second trial of Oe. The young man was declared innocent, but with no evidence. The prosecutor simply gave the ridiculous claim, "We should not blame someone that's not here." Oe was declared guilty not because he committed the crime of murdering a mother and her daughter, but because someone needed to be blamed. Higuruma has lost his faith in a system that should have a steadfast foundation and process, a system that must dedicate itself to the pursuit of truth. But now he sees it all as a staged show for the world to behold. It was like his entire world had unraveled. If justice was blind and humans turned a blind eye to sustain their own comfort, then who could find the truth? Truth has no meaning. If we look back to the cover of Volume 19, Higuruma has his eyes looking into our own while hiding his mouth behind a sunflower. The sunflower in the cover is wilting, showing Higuruma's own mental state and disillusionment with the law. Higuruma's Shikigami, Judge Man, also represents this with its eyes being sewn shut. A man who convinced himself that he needed to keep his eyes open is now forcing them shut. With his ideology shattered, Higuruma is now forcing himself to go against his pre-established morals and philosophy. That's why Higuruma wanted the culling games to continue. He saw the games as a form of salvation. Laws are powerless when the ones who are responsible for enforcing them utilize it for their own gain. No one is forced to follow the laws to begin with. Rules within the culling game, however, must be followed and cannot be broken, only circumvented through the addition of new rules. They are laws built into the system that must be obeyed by all. There's no need for defense or prosecution. Truth is no longer subjective. Those unable to adhere to the system's rules ultimately die at the hands of another sorcerer or by the stripping of their curse technique. Truth has become objective and absolute. It's interesting that Higuruma also wants to see what the removal of a curse technique looks like. It could be due to an application of his own curse technique, confiscation, or maybe the morbid fascination of seeing if someone who breaks the rules is truly punished with death. If the games continued, he would be able to see a world carried by objective truth, but this, of course, leads him to his clash with Yuji Itadori. During the battle, Higuruma opens with his domain expansion, Deadly Sentencing, and we learn about the mechanics of his domain. Deadly Sentencing enforces a no-violence policy onto all combatants, and a victim is put on trial for a random crime they have committed in their life. Due to its randomness, the crime can be anything from jaywalking to murder. Yuji takes the role of defendant and has to convince Judgman that there is a reasonable doubt that he did not commit the crime he is convicted of. Higuruma, however, now takes the role of a prosecutor and gains evidence pertaining to the crime in question through his ability. When we first see his technique activated, Judgman convicts Yuji for the crime of entering a pachinko parlor despite being a minor. Yuji has three options: deny the accusation, confess to the crime, or remain silent. Yuji confesses, but on the basis that he needed to answer nature's call. Higuruma had the evidence given to him by his technique to show that Yuji was also at the exchange counter, putting his claim of using the bathroom into doubt. Yuji is declared guilty, but due to having no curse technique, he instead is stripped of his ability to manipulate cursed energy. Yuji is able to hold his own for a while,
because he's literally built different, and my glorious MC, look at him go.
But Higuruma proves to be too adept. Using his curse technique to conjure a massive gavel, Using his curse technique to conjure a massive gavel, he literally brings the hammer of justice down onto Yuji, a metaphor for how Higuruma is now using the law to prosecute and condemn the type of people he used to defend. Yuji remembered the mechanics of Higuruma's technique, demands for a retrial, and the two are brought back into Judgman's courtroom. It's here during the second trial that Higuruma finds his new resolve shaken. Judgman convicts Yuji for the mass slaughter of countless souls on October 31st, 2018 in Shibuya, but Yuji doesn't turn away. Looking right into Higuruma's eyes without any hesitation, Yuji admits guilt. He doesn't hide or make any excuses for himself. Deep in Yuji's soul, he bears all the weight of Sukuna's sins. Higuruma can't comprehend why Yuji would do such a thing. Because of his curse technique, he knows that the young man before him is innocent, that he was forced to be a bystander in his own body as a demon slaughtered thousands. But the law is blind. It doesn't concern itself with looking for the truth. It simply punishes those condemned guilty under its hammer, even the innocent, who condemn themselves. Judgman's sewn eyes snap open, the darkness of Higuruma's mental state leaking from its sockets as it declares Yuji guilty, giving him the death penalty. The sword of execution glows in Higuruma's hand, a punitive ray of light that instantly kills any given the death penalty by Judgman at the slightest glance. But Yuji steals his resolve, not turning away from his prosecutor. Bearing unjust sins and the curses of those who came before him, Yuji faces his judgment. Higuruma begins to falter. After keeping his eyes open for so long, Higuruma learned that empathizing with others meant understanding their flaws too. The eyes are the windows to the soul, and Higuruma has become sickened by the souls of the victims and assailants he defended over the years. Higuruma convinced himself that there is nothing but darkness in the eyes of man. Even if a glimmer of light shines, all that awaits is a sprawling void waiting to swallow it back up again. He told himself that all people were flawed, hideous. Those who prosecuted the weak who turned on the hands that tried to shield them, all of them had become hideous to his eyes. But that glimmer, that righteousness, and even the imperfections that make that light shine even brighter, is something that other living creatures aren't capable of. Only human beings could create a spark like that, and that spark is something that must be cherished. It was what Higuruma believed when he first became a lawyer, or maybe even before. When it came time to deliver the final blow, Higuruma's eyes locked with Yuji's. When forced to confront the light of someone who blazed forward, shouldering sins that weren't his own, at the light of the people he swore to protect and the values he turned away from, Higuruma was blinded. He looked away. During the aftermath, Higuruma concedes to Yuji, having been reminded of why he practiced the law in the first place: to protect noble and innocent souls. It wasn't Yuji's power, but his character that guided Higuruma back to his true conviction. But now it's too late. He cannot forgive himself. With his ideals restored, Higuruma laments the murder he committed against the judge and prosecutor of Oe's trial, no longer lying to himself about the act of it feeling good. He speaks the truth. It was the worst feeling he's ever felt. Higuruma leaves to think on his actions and resolves to turn himself in once the barriers open back up. His eyes open once more, he can see the injustices he committed and how he must answer for them. Just like before, he can't look away when something's wrong. The lawyer turns his back to Yuji, but is no longer able to look him in the eye. He would only grow to hate himself even more, as he would only be reminded of the ideals and morals that he followed all his life and how he trampled upon them. He would be reminded of how he looked away. Higuruma is one of my favorite characters in Jujutsu Kaisen, one with more depth and nuance that I most likely failed to capture in this video. There's so much more to discuss about him, but I wanted to keep this friendly to anime only is what Season 3. If you liked what I had to say, you can maybe give a like, subscribe. I do plan on maybe doing more of this in the future. It's something that I'm just kind of throwing out there. I, for some reason, felt inspired to do like an analysis video on JJK characters, and I figured Higuruma would be a good start. I'm also putting together a video about everyone's favorite potential man. That should be ready soon. I can also talk more about Higuruma, maybe go more in depth about his potential as a sorcerer, if that's your vibe. Oh, I also stream video games sometimes, just for fun. But let me know down in the comments of what you'd like to see. I'll see what I can do. Anyways, really appreciate you sticking around for this whole spiel, and I hope you have a fantastic day wherever you are. Thanks for watching. Bye.